Hi everyone, and welcome to my guide for the Flurry Rapid Fire Rogue. This is a quite special build that uses two different core skills. I've leveled this from 1 to 100 on hardcore here, and it has turned out to be probably one of the best builds in the game, or at least on the rogue class. I would say this is very competitive with the likes of Death Trap and Twisting Blades. It is super fast, you decimate everything with ease. I built it relatively tanky, and I had no troubles whatsoever the entire way. It was just amazing to play. So the way this works is you have Flurry, which is your main attack. It has a 360-degree circular AoE if you combine it with its legendary aspect. That is very easy to get. And then there is Rapid Fire, that is the big single target nuke. The second ability is not used all too much. It's quite rare that you have to use it, but it does more than twice the damage of Flurry on a single target, even in the setup that I made where I was mainly focusing on buffing Flurry instead of Rapid Fire. If you kind of equally invest into both skills, then Rapid Fire is something like triple even. So this means that I have great clear and I can also defeat bosses really quickly. This is the main reason why I put this in there. And on top of this, this allows me that I run, for example, Shadow Imbuement. Despite Flurry having relatively good AoE clear, it is sometimes a little bit small in these like really large packs and really large rooms with lots of monsters. And the Shadow Imbuement allows you to get those explosions and just pop the entire screen in that case. This setup is based around combo points, so I always have this 3-to-1 rotation between Puncture and Flurry, or Puncture and Rapid Fire, so that you get the most out of each shot. Which also means that we don't really have any resource issues whatsoever. I was running 0 energy cost reduction, I didn't have any resource aspects, and you never have any trouble. Even resource burn maps you can do sometimes. And all around it is very fast because of 2 mobility skills. You have a CC break with the Unstoppable from Shadow Step, and I just never have to wait for any cooldowns. Whenever I fight, I just press my buttons, and the only thing that sometimes helps you to speed up the clear is the Shadow Imbuement. And the main difficulty in the setup is deciding when to use Rapid Fire versus Flurry. So use Flurry like 95% of the time, but those 5% that use Rapid Fire are decisive in actually speeding up your aggression. So this is why the skill is in there. It is for the big single target burst. When you have that construct you have to destroy, when you have an elite that is like alone in the corner, or you have the boss, you will significantly speed up your progression by using Rapid Fire in the right moment. So, for example, the regular bosses here, I use like 1, 2, sometimes 3 Rapid Fires, but it's already like on the longer side of things. Usually I just blast them in like 3 seconds. I already respec my character in-game after reaching level 100, but I did make this D4planner here. So we have the starter setup. This is like what you're striving for with level 50, only codex powers. This entire setup works just from the codex basically, so it's very easy to set up. There's no requirements whatsoever, and you have almost everything you want in the codex already, so it's really nice. Then we have the endgame variant where we have like the Paragons build as well, and we have, for example, something like Condemnation. This is not too hard to find, very useful item for combo point builds. And then we have the best in slot version here, where we run Penitent Greaves. They may be a little bit difficult to find, but usually on my way to level 100 I always found them like a handful of times or so on my rogues, so they're not super rare. You will find them eventually. And this allows you to get a bit more damage in there because you get the chill effect that gives you 10% extra damage. Then you have Frigid Finesse, and you do like some slight adjustments there. As for the skill tree, we have Puncture as our basic attack. This has just the best utility. It gives you vulnerable, it gives you slow, it gives you resources. It's just really great all around, and it also enables the Tricks of the Trade combo. So on the Paragons we have Tricks of the Trade. This is this legendary node here, where you deal 25% extra damage if you use a Cutthroat skill, aka Flurry, after a Marksman skill, aka Puncture. So you get 25% damage multiplier just for playing the game normally. That's really great. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for Rapid Fire. So for Rapid Fire, you lose this advantage here because you have 2 Marksman skills and you don't get this buff. But there's a way to do that with Shadow Step. So for example, on the boss, I would build my 3 combo points with Puncture, then I would Shadow Step, and Shadow Step is a Cutthroat skill, and then you do the Rapid Fire. And like this, you can also get this 25% bonus. Either way, we have full investment into both Flurry and Rapid Fire. On the low levels, when I was starting out with this character at like level 20 or so, I was not going full ham on Rapid Fire, but then as soon as I had like all the basics down, I actually just pumped everything in there so that I had both of them maxed. Flurry is great because it gives you extra healing. We do have Siphoning Strikes on top of that, so we have insane amounts of recovery. and you get some more here. And then you also have 2 different upgrades here that are useful at various stages. So there's Improved Flurry, which makes you spread vulnerable to everything that you hit. So Puncture makes one target vulnerable, you use Flurry, everything is vulnerable. It's superb. You don't need that later, but for the start, it's definitely recommended. Later on, you have the Exploit glyph that does that, and you don't really need this vulnerable spread anymore. So in that case, you can go Advanced Flurry, and then you have a Stun. You can stun for 3 seconds when you evade through enemies and use Flurry afterwards. So sometimes when you see like a large pack of elites, there's like 3 guys stacked up or something, you evade into the pack, press Flurry, and they're all stunned. It's super safe. And as for the rapid fire, this is basically a single target attack, which gets a lot of extra crit chance from the enhancement. And then it also has a lot of extra crit damage from evading. So for example, when I go towards a boss, I would evade as I engage, and then I would do my 3 combo points. Then I would do the Shadow Step, and then I would sometimes even just rotate the entire boss. So this is how much damage it does. It's really good. Here we have the Shadow Step for mobility, so this is usually how I engage packs. If I don't evade into a pack, I will Shadow Step into a pack. And this also gives a stun, so on like a single elite or something, you can just like stun them, they're disabled, you kill them, move on. And then we have the dash. I just have 1 point there just to get it. So usually Shadow Step into the pack, and then after you're done, you dash away towards the next pack. So this is how I play that. We have no subterfuge skills whatsoever. And then we have the Shadow Imbuement here, also with 5 out of 5 ranks. So we have 3 skills here that we actually put full investment into. Kind of interesting setup. And we get extra crit there, we get the non-physical damage. So for example, you can also activate Shadow Imbuement as an extra single target burst, so to say. So this will be like another thing to add there. But for the most part, it's used as the AoE explosions. And then we have no ultimate here, and we have the momentum passive. You could think about running close quarters combat, but the damage was so high that I felt this was completely unnecessary. Especially on hardcore, I felt just the extra damage reduction is really useful, the movement speed feels good, the energy regeneration can be useful in some cases. Momentum is just really strong all around. But you have to see that this is not too easy to proc. So the way to do this is either to attack from behind, which is not really the easiest to do sometimes, or you need to stun or daze or freeze enemies. So there are various ways of doing that. As I mentioned, we have this Flurry stun here, but I don't really use it often enough to really keep up momentum just from that alone. And also, as I mentioned early on, before you have your exploit glyph, you may want to run with the vulnerable upgrade here anyway. But what I did here is I used the Manglers aspect for this. So this is just a very powerful defensive tool in my opinion on the rogue. You daze enemies, and like this you will never have to think about momentum stacks again. It will just always automatically proc. And then occasionally you get like a stack, for example, from the Shadow Step on the boss or something like that, so that you have it up all the time. Before that, yeah, it can be not always up. Maybe close quarters combat would be okay until you get Manglers, but it's also not very hard to find because this is a utility aspect and they do drop frequently. And while we're here, let's talk about the passives a little bit. So we have some defensive passives. Sturdy is very good. Yeah, you have a bit of healing from siphoning strikes. I did pick up Stutter Step, but it's not really necessary. If you need to invest points into anything else, just remove those. We have Weapon Mastery. This is completely cracked for melee builds, so you always want that. We have the combo here with Concussive, Trick Attacks, and Rapid Gambits. So you get 12% extra crit when you knock them down. You knock them down when you crit them when they are dazed. So you can daze them with the Manglers or in the early game setup with the Shadow Slicer. So this is how you trigger this. And then you also have Rapid Gambits where you reduce your evade cooldown when you daze them. So this is like a really nice all-around package here for extra damage, for extra speed, etc. I really like this combo. We have Exploit and Malice fully stacked up. Then depending on where you are here with your setup, you have either Precision Imbuement or Frigid Finesse. And then we have down here Adrenaline Rush and Haste for the extra movement speed. On the Paragons, we attach 4 different boards. The 2 main ones here are Exploit Weakness. So you hit a lot, you hit very fast. So you can stack this very, very quickly up to 15% extra damage. So especially on the boss fights, or sometimes you have like some elite fight that just lasts a little bit longer. It can help you. And there's also a bunch of really good rare nodes on this entire board. There's vulnerable damage, there's damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, more vulnerable damage, and there's Hunter Killer for the extra elite damage and the movement speed on elite kill. So I really wanted to pick this up for the extra speed, just to like go faster and basically reach near maximum movement speed all the time. That was great. Then the second one is Tricks of the Trade. So this has this really powerful legendary node that I mentioned. And this has a bunch of other really good stuff here, like Brawler, gives you close damage and damage reduction. I really like this node as well. There's stuff like Havoc that gives you lots of crit. And then it also has a decent rare nodes here on the glyph. So there's Armor and there's Focus. And we buff these further with Diminished Glyph here. And then we have two more boards where we mainly pick up a few rare nodes and glyphs. So the next one here is the No Witness with Exploit. So this is the Exploit glyph that makes everything vulnerable. It comes quite late in the setup, but again, on Flurry it's not really a problem because you just use this vulnerable spread until you get Exploit, and then you switch it. And then we pick up a few rare nodes here, and the Ruin, which has extra crit damage again. And lastly, here's the Cunning Stratagem board where we put Turf. So you can stack a lot of strength for this glyph here. It gives you extra damage reduction from close targets, and it has okay rare nodes in range. We can't reach the bonuses here unless you roll like all stats on your crossbow or so, but it doesn't matter too much. So you just deal with it. You just don't have those bonuses here. Yeah, and the other two glyphs here are Combat. Combat with the crit damage is very powerful on basically any rogue build. And we have the Closer glyph. So there's even more damage reduction while wielding a melee weapon and extra damage for your cutthroat skills. So again, we don't buff rapid fire with this, but rapid fire is so powerful that it just doesn't really matter anymore. But this is like the starting setup. You can also just not level Closer and then just go straight to the Pentagram Grease setup where I actually replace this one glyph here with Control. So because we have this permanent chill effect around us with the Pentagram Greaves, we can actually get a lot more damage output from this glyph. Because this applies to both Rapid Fire and Flurry, and even the Shadow Imbuement, so you have bigger explosions. And also the secondary bonus is quite powerful. You get extra 10% damage, or even 20% when you stun them, which you can do with the Flurry. But this is pretty much the only thing that I changed in those Paragon setups. So once you get those boots, I would not run Closer anymore. You can do that if you want a damage reduction, but I felt that Control was just really nice for the extra damage output, and this is what I used in the end. As for the items, we started with a level 50 setup, so we have the cheats aspect here, gives you damage reduction from crowd controlled enemies, and you generally do that with either the boots or with your puncture, so he's slow and chill. We have Disobedience for the extra armor stacks, very powerful aspect, even though we don't have dots in this build. This doesn't have any poisons or so. You do attack really fast and you do stack this, at least to some degree, depending on the pull size. Then we have the Shadow Slicer aspect. This is also from the Codex. It doesn't really do any damage, but the Shadow Clone produces a second dash, and that second dash can daze enemies. So if you go on the skill tree here, this is actually like a slight tweak that I did between the level 50 setup and the endgame setups, where we have Mangler. I have those 2 points here in Enhanced and Disciplined Dash. And with Disciplined Dash, you first slow them, and then the second one dazes them. So with Shadow Slicer, you get a daze on the first dash, basically. You just have to dash into a pack, and it will be dazed, and this will help you with the momentum stacks. So this is like the one way to solve this, until later on, I respec those 2 points, and I put them in Rapid Gambits. And this allows you to have a lot more evades, so even with the Pentagram Grease, where I have only 1 evade charge, sometimes it just comes back in like a second or so from just dazing a few targets. So this is kind of nice, and you can either do this with the Shadow Slicer, or again later on you have the Mangler for that. So this one replaces the other basically. As for the other Codex powers, we have the Might, so this will always stay in the build. We have the Ghost Walker, this can later be replaced by either Ravager for the extra Shadow Step charge, or then the Pentagram Greaves. We have Edge Masters, this always stays here. We have Rapid for the basic attack speed. We have Corruption, just gives you like slightly bigger Shadow Movement explosions, and some of the buffs are a little bit amplified. We have the Encircling Blades, this is the most important aspect here. And you also get this very early, so when you make a rogue, you have to do a class quest at level 15 that leads you to Forsaken Quarry. And this is exactly the dungeon you have to finish for this. So you get it basically by default and very early. And then we have the Expectant here, so any core point build has that because of the extra damage. And here early on, I just put a Wind Striker. I just felt like the movement speed was really good, but you can do almost anything there. I didn't really feel like there was that much else worth putting. But for the later game, we replace a few of those aspects here. So for example, you can find Accelerating, and this gives you even more attack speed. I was a big fan of attack speed here. I actually had this on my amulet, so I had tons of attack speed. You get 45% from Flurry, you get like 15% from your glove, and then on the amulet with Accelerating, that's another 38. So I was almost reaching the attack speed cap of plus 100%, and it just felt really good. with how fast I was attacking. These combos were like done in like half a second. One last note about those legendary aspects here. So you see that I have disobedience on the amulet. It's not really too required to have this here in my opinion. This is like a rather defensive choice. And you could move this to the helm, it can drop cheats, and you can get an extra offensive power. So for example, on your amulet you could put Retribution. Retribution gives you extra damage against stunned targets, up to 40% or 60% even on the amulet. So if you are a big stun enjoyer with the evade and flurry combo, then this gives you tons of damage. For the stat priorities on the items, there's nothing really out of the ordinary here. You want stuff like crit chance, crit damage, vulnerable damage. These are some of the top stats in the game for basically any build that is not like a full dot build. You want, of course, the skill ranks for both Flurry and Rapid Fire. If you have to choose, I would say you should prioritize Flurry, but basically as soon as you find a glove that has both of them, you're gonna stick to that and then try to get the crit and then try to get the attack speed later. So this is like the dream combo here. You want to focus on good defensive stats, so especially your chest and pants. You can roll damage reduction from close, damage reduction from distant, life. You can roll even percent armor. So you can go with a bunch of things there, and this is how you survive. So these two slots are really important for your survival. Make sure you don't neglect them. Then we have the amulet. There are a lot of different stats that can roll here that are actually kind of useful. I really like movement speed and cooldown just to like speed up the progression, speed up the farming. It's really good. The best passive to roll here is Weapon Mastery, but there are others. There's Exploit, there's Malice, there's Frigid Finesse. Technically you can go with any of them, but Weapon Mastery is a bit better in my opinion. And then you can have stuff like damage reduction or maybe some other damage stat or so. So there's a bunch of options here. Then we have the helm. You want to have something like this here. Cooldown, #1 priority. And then I would say life, armor, shadow imbue, exactly in that order basically. The shadow imbuement ranks are not all too important. So if you have something else there, it's okay. But I think especially late game, it's kind of nice to just have bigger explosions. It just helps you to clear out those packs. And then for your weapons, you have basically the same stuff as on the rings. You have like the crit damage, you have the vulnerable, and then stuff like main stat, close damage, core damage. So these are the stats you're looking for here. If you're not using Penitent Greaves, then I suggest your boots to look like this. So you want move speed at the very least, and then the move speed on elite kill is very nice, and then it's kind of whatever afterwards. So yeah, you can go for a bit of energy cost reduction, you can go for the damage reduction while injured or dodge chance, and that's pretty much about it for what rolls on boots. And I would definitely prioritize the maximum evade charge implicit here. So this is just... So that's it for the overview of the setup, and now I want to talk a little bit more about the playstyle, especially the rapid fire. So I'm going to show you one really standard example, which is the constructs. You see here this intermission event. You see how fast I completed this. I literally just once cycled this whole thing. And this is the power of rapid fire. Instead of standing there and doing like 3, 4, 5 combos with 30 or so, I just destroy this thing and move on. I'm going to show you another example here. So here's an elite. You see them on the top left, the Animus carrier. And he's completely alone. There's no other enemies around him. So there's not really a point to use Flurry in this case. So I evade to him and I just destroy him and move on. And the same with this guy here. You see I used rapid fire for this as well. And then this guy also in the corner, we just defeat him. If you look at the full clip in action without stopping, you see how fast I actually clear up those elites. They're basically dead in like a second each, because I just have this high attack speed to build those combo points. I do the rapid fire and I'm moving on. So this is like really a strength of this whole setup, because the elites never really get to do anything. Like if you have the right decision making and the right reaction, you can actually disable or completely destroy those elites before they ever do anything, which is another factor that contributes to this build being extremely safe. So especially those single target elites that are just sitting somewhere in a corner, we just go there and they never get to cast anything. So sometimes it's not always extremely clear if you should use Flurry or Rapid Fire, but for the most part, when there's many enemies, you want to use Flurry. When there's few enemies, you want to use Rapid Fire, especially when there's a single target that you want to prioritize, you know, some dangerous elite in the corner, or even here, those Goldman Shamans. You know, just try to get rid of them so they don't blast you with the lightning. These kind of things, it can definitely be really helpful. Or here, there's an explosion, so I have to wait outside and I can't actually dive in to attack them with Flurry. I just use the rapid fire in that case and don't waste any time. And that concludes the guide. I hope you enjoyed it. I gotta say, this is a super fun build and probably the fastest I've played. So I've leveled 4 rogues to almost 100 now. And I think this is even faster than the one that I used on launch with Twisting Blades, or at the very least it's kind of rivaling that speed. So this definitely goes into S tier in my book. I can just recommend you guys to try it out. I wish you good luck, and see you guys next time.